Well, China's influence in the Middle East is increasing to a great extent. It's growing and it's evolving. It has no longer been only concerned with economic aspects as it has always been. It's expanding its interest to include political, strategic, security interest in various different aspects. So its main focus is pragmatic and flexible. It starts with economy, but then it extends and tries to learn about the conflicts in the region, about the serious problems in the region, and tries to involve itself in a solution for these problems. China's involvement in the Middle East, I would term it as a business, economic and peace promoter. So it basically tries to pertain its non-interventionist policies, but it tries to provide solutions that ends conflict and provide peace, stability and security in the region, mainly because this serves its own interest in implementing the Belt and Road Initiative. So in order to guarantee that the Belt and Road Initiative succeeds and prospers as it wants, it needs to promote the stability and security of the region, and this is done through non-interventionism, through promoting economic projects, through investing more in infrastructure and oil and gas industries. So this is what China is basically doing. It's following a pragmatic, flexible, task-oriented perspective in order to achieve stability, to increase more economic prosperity in the future in the Middle East. The relations between Egypt and China are as well blooming and prospering to a great extent. China has been interested in Egypt for a very long time. It has been a persistent partner to Egypt despite the fact that the uprisings of 2011, despite the turmoil that happened in Egypt at the time, China did not leave Egypt. China did not decide to postpone its involvement in the country, yet it stayed. And I would recall, for instance, President Morsi's first visit was to China. President Sisi afterwards continued to visit China and established strategic bilateral relations with China. So China's economic interest in Egypt is basically booming and evolving as well, for many reasons. Basically because of the Suez Canal, because it's a very strategic spot on the maritime Silk Road, because China wants to maintain the secure and safe passage of its vessels through the Suez Canal as well, because China believes in the potential role of Egypt and the role it could play in its international trade with Africa and establishing more ties with Africa in a sense. So China's interest in Egypt has been long going and it's extending in the future as well. I would expect that this involvement would increase in the future by resolving the problems that they both see and recognize because it achieves mutual benefits for both. Egypt wants to restore its regional and role and influence that it once had before 2011, and China wants to play a greater role in the Middle East and in the Mediterranean in general, and fostering good relations and concrete relations with Egypt would help her in that manner. First of all, it's a concern for both Egypt and China to start considering the investment in human resources and human capabilities. The Chinese usually prefer to rely on their labor force rather than the labor force of the country that they're visiting, but both countries are discussing that in the matter. Egypt's major resource is its human resources. Egypt is a population of 100 million people. The largest thing we have is people. So both countries are considering that fact, that China would invest more in human resources, in more technical training, in more education, in more projects that are directed to the people. On the other side, China has been present in Egypt for a very long time. They have TIDA and the investment of the Special Economic and Industrial Zone in Egypt in Suez, closer to Suez, actually in Ain Sokhna. They call it the first Chinese community in Egypt. So it's been an industrial zone that is flourishing and blooming, and there's a large Chinese community in Egypt as well, working in technical industries, in telecommunication industries. So I would see that there is a booming as well and an increasing numbers of Chinese communities coming to Egypt. They also started discussing increasing the amounts of tourists, in exchange of tourists on both sides. They started even working on more scholarships from China to Egyptian students, more opening of Confucian centers in Egypt and in different countries of the Middle East. So yes, people are on the move between both countries, and I expect the Chinese community in Egypt to increase as well.